Hello, Global Theater. My name is Jerry Fielka. Today is July 15, 2022. We want to thank Rob Grant and his amazing podcast. I'm probably wrong about everything. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here with Roger Clark Miller. Where in the heck you calling in from, Roger?
I'm calling in from a mountainside in southern Vermont, where I now live.
Very cool. Thanks for your time. The first question is, what is the best thing for a human being?
To find themselves integrated into the world they live, through friendships and meening with the environment. I figure.
Yeah.
And health helps that,
Health helps. I like that.
Health. It's a new slogan.
Health helps. What's your favorite form of information, how it comes into you?
It's hard to say. Certainly my ears are a big part of it. I'm not a huge fan of movies. I can't recognize movie stars, but when there's a good movie, I like it. But I like just walking around in the woods, and even when I was living in Somerville, which is in Boston, just walking down the street, I'd see stuff on vines growing on the side of a garage, and that would inspire me towards music, or I would hear a sound. And I guess it's mostly eyes and ears, fairly traditional human interactions.
Why do you think humans collect or gather information?
I could be very abstract and say to fill the void.
I like that. That's a good answer.
You can't help but your brain cogitates and needs something to cogitate on.
Yeah. Do you think this need or want to collect information is more innate or more invented?
Well, most inventions come out of necessity, which means innate. But some people, I think it's a mix. It's a solution to something that's an inherent problem.
Do thoughts create emotions?
Sure.
I don't. Go ahead.
For example, dreams, which are entirely thought-based, they're just like riddled with more intense emotions than you feel in general, like during the day,
I like that. We'll get into dreams. Okay. Fill in the blank, Roger. I don't know what I think until I
immerse myself in it.
Yeah. Chomsky says, oh, no, wait. There's a question before that. Sorry. Can humans think without language?
I have no idea. I've always thought with language, as far back as I can remember, probably when I was 0 to 6 months, I didn't, but pretty quickly we realized that sounds coming from our parents and our associates have meaning, and that leads towards language. It's almost you can quote Burroughs on that, like language is a virus, and then you get trapped into thinking the language that you grew up on living. But on the other hand, it seems to be the way humans do it, the way that the unique brain, the brain grindings in there, that it likes language.
Yeah, you broke up a little. Your Burroughs quote was "Language is a virus."
Yeah, it's a pretty famous one. I think Laura Anderson used it on a record.
Yeah,
but yeah, it's because you're stuck in the language that you learned. I sometimes wonder if people who know 3 different languages and can think of those different languages, if they actually have broader concepts of the world, because each language comes kind of from a specific tradition. If you learn, Swahili, English, and North, Korean, that would give you a pretty diverse way of looking at the world. Inuit language, whatever.
Yeah. Actually, you anticipated this. Chomsky says a language is not just words. It's a culture, a tradition, a whole unification of community, a whole history that creates what a community is. What do you do when language doesn't work, when language breaks down?
I mean, I make up words all the time. I just make them up. And also I have like one, everybody has some quirks, and sometimes I can't remember people's names. I'm terrible at names. And I remember once with a friend of mine, they were looking for an umbrella and I couldn't remember the word for umbrella. So I made up the word air defense, but in the context, everybody knew what I was talking about. And I've sometimes written songs entirely in a made up language, because then you can project your own meaning onto it. And it's, it's still gutsy, like the way you present something, like it still has, it implies something, but it's a little more vague if you don't use real words, or quotes already acknowledged words.
Yeah. Have you ever explored Finnegan's Wake by James Joyce?
During a very difficult period in my life, I read it from cover to cover.
You're kidding.
I've had friends that when I told them that, they started moving, like they were sitting next to me and they started moving away from me so they wouldn't catch whatever I had. But it was a very difficult time. It was during a divorce, and I was drinking quite a bit. I really like high quality beer, like it's legendary, my interest in high quality beer, but I've tempered quite a bit since then. But I had just come back from a pub, and I was a little toasty. I was in the subway in Boston. There was nobody else in the car, so I was lying down on the benches, and I had just read 2 pages of Finnegan's Wake, and I was making notes about it while I really needed something to keep me sane during this period. And I wrote down that these 2 pages perfectly described the pub experience. I opened those 2 pages 3 days later, and I couldn't see a single reference to pubs. And I told this to a friend of mine, and he said, "You got into the magic of Finnegan's Wake. It's whatever you want it to mean. Like your subconscious projects onto it." And all I can say was that was evidence of that. I was fascinated with how precise he had described the pub experience. And then there was no reference to pubs when I looked at it later. What the hell? That's brilliant.
Yeah, I've hosted a Finnegan's Wake reading club for over 2 decades, and the whole thing is reading it aloud with a group of people. But in essence, you read it word to word. I mean, you read it cover to cover to yourself silently, or did you read it out loud?
Occasionally, I would have to read it out loud just to figure out if these words, like, half the words are made up, or not half, but and some of them he is using foreign languages. So I was trying to deduce which were the made up ones, which were languages I didn't know by looking at the way the letters were organized. Like I said, I really needed something for my brain to cogitate on to kind of keep me stable. And it's hard thinking that you'd read Finnegan's Wake to stay stable, but it worked for me. I will say one other thing. I have a record that is just coming out, 8 dream interpretations for solo electric guitar ensemble, where I use dreams to organize the music. And I have 2 descriptions in there. One is, and the first one is how I got into dreams and music. And I start off, I'll read it to you now. Here's the album. I just got the vinyl. And
nice.
And the opening line is, "My interest in dreams has been continuous since childhood, as has humanity's continuous since childhood." And then I go through describing a lot of stuff, sorry. And then at the end of it, it says the exact same thing. "My interest in dreams has been continuous since childhood, as has humanity's continuous since childhood," which is very much like River Run, River Run. So it's a loop, but also I use loops in the music so I can make a solo ensemble. So my thing looped back, but to me, I was pleased that I could utilize an indirect reference to River Run, River Run.
Yeah, it's a cyclical book. The end of the last sentence starts back at the beginning of the first sentence.
But you can you can guarantee if you read it again, it would be a completely different book.
Oh,
It's a different book
yes,
every time, and yet
it is.
the same book, same words.
Yeah, we could talk about that for hours, and I'm glad we brought it up, basically just because you said I invent words. But one other quickie little thing, there was a great experimental filmmaker, Phil Solomon, who was in Boston also,
Hmm.
um, the projectionist at Orson Welles Theater,
Those
and
just
he
before my time. Yeah.
yeah, and he was reading Finnegan's Wake as a projectionist, to kill time, and he'd get so pissed, he'd throw the book at the wall. Like, yeah, so I
Well, that's
says, that's the beauty of the Wake is that it pissed this guy off in Boston, and you're in Boston, and it's keeping you sane and helping you remain stable. So there's the full spectrum right there.
full spectrum. That's a fact. It's everything to anybody, whatever. That's the rumor I hear.
Is your observations of humans in general, are we more thinking beings or more feeling beings?
Feeling.
Yeah.
People are not very rational. I mean, look around you. I mean, maybe not in your room, but look at the United States right now. People are just unbridled feeling with no balance in the intellect.
Two questions from Alan Turing, 1950s. Is thinking a function of the soul?
My only answer is, what is the soul? I don't
Yeah.
have an answer for that.
Well, no, you win. The whole point of this series is to invent new questions. So you answered a question with a question. That's what the Irish do. They go, Irish answer questions with questions. They go, we do, eh?
Isn't that also the Socratic technique? Something like that?
It is indeed. The second Turing question is, can machines think?
I I believe that they can put things together differently to pose questions and pose observations. I'm not sure it's quite thinking, but I haven't thought about that a lot. I mean,
Yeah.
I love Blade Runner, so
Do you more pursue happiness or more pursue meaning?
probably meaning. Like I derive meaning from creating things, and usually I have way more ideas than I could possibly activate. And Deb, who I live with, says, you've got to just cut some of these out because you're driving yourself, you're making yourself unhealthy. So it's like, right, back off. I don't have to activate every one of these ideas. I get stressed out because I have so many things to do, and how come I can't finish that? I'm not 5 people, that's all. And so I
Yeah.
have to, so she's helping me kind of come to grips with my limitations.
It's beautiful. Does the brain more detect consciousness or create consciousness? Like, is consciousness there bubbling away and we're detecting it, or are we actually creating it?
I don't actually know, but it's probably a mix. There's
Yeah.
probably a give and take. You know, you could ask this kind of question, like, what is consciousness if no one is there to know about it? It's like the tree in the forest problem.
Yep. What's faster, speed of light or speed of thought?
Like,
There's a poet, Audre Lorde, who said, you can't dismantle the master's house using the master's tools. Yvonne Rainer responded and said, you can if you expose the tools. What new tool do you suggest or you gravitate towards?
our house is right now under construction, so I just went outside and started looking at the rocks and the jackhammers and stuff. So I'm not sure I can answer that question.
Yeah.
I probably could if my house wasn't being worked on, but it just dragged me back to harsh reality.
Yeah. When I asked George Clinton all these questions in Michigan many years ago, the whole interview was guys working on his roof with like noise, and it was like literally they were tearing the roof off the mother sucker.
Burning down the house, yeah.
What new toy do you suggest, or what new toy do you gravitate towards?
By toy, meaning something that amuses me.
Yeah, again, you put the questions into the context you want,
Mm,
whatever you want to define toy as.
Mostly, I value time more than
Yeah,
objects.
it's good.
Uh, and that's partly why I often have had very little money because I didn't want to work all the time. I
Yeah.
prefer to be able to wander around, look around, and think about stuff. So really, I mean, the world is a toy in that respect.
That is a great answer. What do you worry about when you go to bed at night?
A, I fall asleep very easily, but B, it's usually I'm juggling so many things like I'm Trinary Systems recording a record next week. I've got an art exhibit coming up. I had to cancel another art exhibit for my drawings. I want to recreate. I want to create a new one of my modified vinyl pieces, and so I have to stop. I worried that all these things like, look, I could follow that idea much further, and no, you must sleep. No, and that kind of thing. And again, that's what Deb is trying to help me to keep me from going crazy. There was a period just before the pandemic kicked in, where I was having concerts of my string quartet music, and I wrote a piece called "Music for String Quartet and Two Turntables," where I had made a record of record noise that the quartet played to. Plus, I was going to be kind of manipulating another record, not really scratching, but sort of. And I had to get that concert together. It wasn't fully composed, and I had my first art installation at the same time. And every night I was solving, like I'd wake up in the middle of the night having solved the problem, but I wasn't sleeping enough.
Yeah.
So, that's the kind of stuff that gives me anxiety. I mean, the rest of the world is going straight to hell, but I keep my worries close to myself most of the time.
Super cool, Roger. This is fun. Marshall McLuhan learned from Ezra Pound, the poet, that artists are the antenna of the race. And again, I mean by artists, filmmakers, musicians, painters, poets. And what the artists are doing is they're broadcasting and detecting the hidden psychic effects of our inventions so
Mm-hmm.
that we can learn to cope with what we don't like about them. So I asked you the question Marshall probed his whole career. Why do we humans ignore the hidden psychic effects of our inventions, even though the artists are broadcasting them to us?
Willful ignorance.
That's great.
But
Willful ignorance.
to your point, one of my pieces in my art installation called "Transmuting the Prosaic" is a film. It's called the Davis Square Symphony, and Davis Square is a major square in Somerville. And I filmed it from 5 different locations in the 4 different seasons, the traffic patterns. And then I made a different scale for every season, and then I put the scale up against the screen. When a car goes through, it's the top note and the bottom note of the chord. And so sometimes it's like actually incredibly beautiful, but none of it did I create other than I set the game in motion. But
Yeah.
traffic suddenly becomes beautiful. I turn it into a beautiful orchestral score. So I guess that's an example of what he may have been mentioning.
Yeah,
Looks like
that was really, really good, Roger. And do artists have moral obligation?
mostly to themselves. But if you're true to yourself as an artist, you're digging into the deep unconscious of Homo sapiens. So it probably touches something universal if you're honest enough with yourself. I think.
Yeah. Well, Louis Buñuel said, "I'm for anyone who seeks the truth, but I part ways when they claim they found it." Any comment there?
That's a very good comment on his part.
Yeah,
I mean, when people claim they know the truth, it's over.
yeah. But it's also this seeking. The cliche goes, the journey's more important than the destination. Why do we have to name or seek a destination if the journey's more important?
Uh, humans are goal oriented. But I don't know if it was Wittgenstein. I haven't really read these guys, or Schopenhauer, one of them. I just remember a quote he said, "The problem with humans is you can't just sit in a room in a chair and be happy. You need
Oh,
to you need to be doing something." I can't remember which one of those gentlemen said that, but even if you think you're not goal oriented, you still go, I'm going to go get some Doritos now so that I can watch, Gilligan's Island. That's goal oriented.
That is good. Roger, are you more afraid of new ideas or more afraid of old ideas?
Rigid ideas I'm afraid of.
Wow.
And sometimes the new ones lead the wrong direction, but usually the rigidity is what makes me uptight.
Can you conjure up your earliest memory ever or one of them?
This is one I sort of remember, but there's a photograph. So, I could be projecting onto the photograph, but I'm a person like right now I'm barefoot. I much prefer to be barefoot than to wear shoes. And, like when I did the paper route as a kid, they'd say, "Here comes little Tom Sawyer doing the paper route." But the first memory that I remember, or maybe my older siblings, Giff and France, told me about it, but I was born in 52. So they gave you these really patent leather shoes that were like really rigid. They hurt your feet. And apparently I cried when and I hated them. Like, I was 2. I had a right to cry. I was 2. And then my mom got me some leather sandals. And when she got me those, and there's a picture of me and I'm like really happy. And that is if I have to go to my earliest memory. I'm not even sure that's entirely my memory. That's a partial memory and it makes total sense to me. That's the one I think of.
Is memory more a curse or more a blessing?
Probably a tie.
Very good.
It's hard to escape, but it's to have a timeline behind you that you feel like you're a continuum with others, and the world. That's kind of good.
Tell me someone within your immediate family and then outside your immediate family, just briefly, who had an impact on you like a role model, and what specifically was that impact?
I I mean, I was in a family with 5 children and 2 parents. All of them influenced me, but because I'm a musician and an artist, the ones that influenced me the most, and you asked me for one person, but they are identical twins. So
Nice.
I'll count them for the purposes of this discussion. We'll count them as an entity. They're 2 years younger than me, Lawrence and Benjamin Miller. They were in Destroy All Monsters. They were in Sprout and Lair with me. We discovered in 1969, when my parents were out square dancing, I was 17, they were 15, and I had a band in the bass that was rehearsing. I was writing kind of Jimi Hendrix knockoffs. And we went downstairs. For some reason, we decided to do this. We went downstairs and we improvised in a way that was more like Interstellar Overdrive, or it was like free rock. Like it didn't matter if it was atonal or tonal, and it was so liberating. And then the next weekend, we did the same thing upstairs in the living room. My parents were out square dancing, and we had a piano, trumpet, cornet, clarinet, drums, and singing, a small PA system. And those 2 events, Frick Trio Electric and At the Playgrounds of Olympus, these 2 improvisations are kind of pivotal in my life in 1969. I believe they're pivotal also to Lair and Ben's lives. Lawrence and Benjamin, I call them Lair and Ben because they're my brothers. So I don't think they were my mentor, my mentors any more than I was their mentors, but we're like co-mentors, and we kind of discovered this at the same time. And I started everything I did from that moment on had meaning, whereas before it was just kind of like crazy stuff that I would do. And then from then on, my drawings had a purpose, my music had a purpose, and my writings had a purpose. I think more so than Larry and Ben, because I was 17 and they were 15, and things do happen at ages. So what happened to me might have happened to them at a slightly later age because of child psychology. But that was profound.
That was really articulate. I appreciate that. And then outside your immediate family, someone who had an impact on you, just briefly, what was the impact?
Well, I'll go back to one of the first ones from outside my family. Not the very first, because there's always many. But my first band, Sprott and Lair, which had my two brothers in it. Also, Harold Kirchen played trumpet. So it was guitar, bass, drums, and trumpet. And his brother was Bill Kirchen in Commander Cody and the Lost Planet Airmen. I wrote an album's worth of material, like complete. It was all original material with some ideas from Larry and Ben, but mostly it was mine. And that summer, a friend of mine learned how to record, and we made a recording of it. And I thought, like, I'm out of high school, and look what I just did. And then psychedelia terminated, the band folded, and it was as if all what I was aiming for just went like this. And for the record, it didn't really happen again till 1979, when I joined Mission to Burma in Boston, and punk rock gave me new energy. But by 71, I think it was the fall of 70, a woman, Gertrude Karath, who was a modern dancer in the 40s or 50s. She was like 75 when I met her, and I was 19 or 20 or 18, whatever it was. She was writing a book about the use of rock music and folk music in the liturgy, of all things. And she asked a friend of mine about how rock music fits in, like what are fuzz tones, what are wah-wahs, and he said, well, you should talk to Roger, he knows more about this. And so she called me up, and whatever. So I gave her the tape. Like, I was really kind of depressed. Like, all my vision that I'd been working toward just hit a brick wall, and it was over. And this might have been 71. And I loaned her the tape. She came over and picked it up. And 2 hours later, I got a phone call from her, and she was completely freaked out. She said, this music is incredible. You're going to write the book. I'm just going to scrap my whole other thing, and you're going to write the book. And I was like, what? She was like a 75-year-old woman, and I was 19, I think. And so I scored. I wrote out the scores for every song, like all the drum parts, all the guitar parts, wrote the lyrics, wrote what I thought the meanings were, and incorporated some of my drawings in it. It's called With Magnetic Fields Disrupted, published by Ann Arbor Publishers. And that was, it didn't, hardly anybody knew about it, but still, it was in the Ann Arbor Public Library, and there was an article in the Ann Arbor News. So this was the first time that when it seemed like I'd hit a brick wall and everything was just doom, somebody came along and helped me to see that I was worth something.
Really beautiful.
Yes.
Did your parents, really well described, really good with words. Thank you, Roger. Did your parents raise you a particular religion?
Scientist. My dad was an ichthyologist. He's curator of fishes at the University of Michigan. My mom grew up scientist, natural philosophy. They would send us to Sunday school Sundays, I think mostly to get us out of the house. It was a Baptist church for some reason. Maybe they tried to get us a balanced view. I don't know. It was mostly just an escape, and I started getting pretty irritated by it later on. I did learn something from it, though. There's two takeaways from it. The one story that I remember is the Good Samaritan, and that's where a priest said, all you people who claim to be religious and part of my religion, walked past this guy who needed help. And this guy who was a Samaritan was not part of your religion. He was the only one that's helped. So he is probably more religious than you are, something like that. And I didn't even realize until recently why that story has stuck with me, because I am non-denominational. That's a fact. Yeah. The other thing I learned was that if you learn at sixth grade, which was the last time we had to go to Sunday school, if you learned the Lord's Prayer, you would get the Bible. And I don't need to learn the Lord's Prayer. So I refused to do it. And they still gave me the Bible anyways. That's a real life lesson, that you can often skip the game, play around the game, and still get the goal. That's the best thing I learned about in Sunday school.
That was well done. Do you pray?
Not in the normal sense. I don't pray to anything. There's this kind of, you know what active imagination is? It's kind of like you invent things in your head and you go there. You know, some of that's kind of new agey stuff, but I went to this thing in 1970 or 71. And I built this place, like this workshop in my mind that I, go to, like the colors of the chakra. It works because, there's many ways to go about this. And sometimes I'll project onto this, you put a white frame around the screen of something you want. And then I have all the little spirits in my room, which are all just parts of myself. If you go back deep enough, I have a kind of a Jungian aspect to the way I think. If you go back deep enough, I'll find the same place where I connect to you. You personally that I'm talking to now, and everybody else. Because back there, if you go far enough, there's the collective unconscious of the race, which we all are, Homo sapiens or variations. So that's how I would, if I really say I pray, but that would be the closest thing to it.
If God does exist, what would you like God to say to you after you die?
Not bad.
Roger, do evil people exist, or does evil use people as a vehicle?
You can't really separate it. I think of that as being like on the spectrum, like pure evil and pure good. They hardly ever get there. There we go. Make sure I can see them on the screen. They hardly ever reach pure, but it's kind of on the spectrum, and it's generated by, some animals are more generous. Are more kindly than other animals, even things that aren't human beings.
The hidden question really here is, how do you advise someone to deal with an enemy? And I'm going to set it up with a few thinkers' thoughts. Alan Watts says, if you acknowledge your enemy, you empower them. Coppola stole from the mob and the samurais. Keep your friends close and your enemies closer. JFK says, forgive your enemy, but don't forget their name. And Fellini says, I need an enemy. So it's a lot of thoughts. The basic question is, how do you advise someone to deal with an enemy? But first, how would you respond to Alan Watts? If you acknowledge your enemy, you empower them.
Well, yeah, if you directly engage, it becomes a loop, usually a negative loop. The way that here's an example. Somebody that's a relative, not sort of a relative anyways. He's a MAGA guy. I am not a MAGA guy. And he was, complaining bitterly about the Mexicans coming over the border. It's like, man. Anyways. And so I said, well, yeah, let's get catapults and we'll just catapult them back. And really funny. But to me, it was just like the ultimate, sarcastic comment. But it made him laugh, and maybe that loosened him up a little bit. I don't know. I certainly do not want to catapult anybody anywhere.
Yeah.
I could. There are a few people that are so evil that I wouldn't mind catapulting them. But if they're so almost to the pure, it's better to get rid of them because they'll do more damage than good. But that opens a whole other game.
No, that was good. Back to James Joyce. He was the first projectionist in Dublin 100 years ago. He basically checked out. He said, this is stupid. Why should I go inside a building and see a movie of a tree when I can go outside and see a real tree? Years later, Faulkner said, sometimes the best fiction is more true than journalism. Why do we have to recreate things in order to get them? Why do we have to go to a theatrical play of people acting out life? Why don't we just live life?
Well, that is a good question. I personally, that's partly why I don't watch TV shows or I'm not a big movie fan like that. I would rather, my friends are just as interesting as these people. But sometimes in the same sense that, like Sophocles wrote plays in ancient Greece, it simmers down things to the essence. When it's good, that's what it does. But when I see like sitcoms, I'm like, why would I want to watch a sitcom? Like I mean, but I know lots of people do. Some of my friends do, and I know some people that are intelligent also do. So
Yeah.
it's just I'm not wired for that. You know, I'd rather experience it directly. And lots of times when people are watching movies, I'd rather be walking in the woods. You know, to be
Yeah.
honest, it's more calming and more interesting, and there's more information per square inch in a woods because it's not pixels. It's like, I don't know what it is in your eye. Your eye is taking in
Yeah.
information in your ears, but it's, you know, even though it just looks like, yeah, it's just a bunch of trees and leaves, but it's a lot of information and a different type, maybe.
Roger, let's go back to music. So you did this big, profound thing with your brothers when you're 17-ish. Your parents are going to square dancing. At Set it up, like, where was the tipping point where you said, I want to pursue making music? Like, what are you listening to in the house, like vinyl, or is it live music? And then you see something or hear something, go, that's what I want to do. What was your tipping point to pursue music?
Well, you know, in my house, my dad was a piano player. He played Chopin, Beethoven. We even had the Rite of Spring in the house, César Franck, Sibelius, Saint-Saëns. So it was a musical household, and my dad liked piano playing. All the kids took music lessons. So I took piano lessons when I was a kid, and I was apparently decent at it. I still make a living as a piano player. Uh, but it was just something I did, you know, just like one of the many things I did. And then that group, you might have heard of them. They were on Ed Sullivan show. I think they were called the Beatles. Literally, you know, every kid I know was excited to see him. But literally, by the time that first song was over, my life was completely changed. It was like, I know who I am now. I'm a rocker. And I had no idea before that. You know, I was in 12th grade. I was in, sorry, 6th grade. I was 12 years old. And in a way, I was the target age. And after that, all of a sudden I had a purpose in life, like a conscious purpose. I had a purpose before, like have fun, run around, go swimming, you know. But now I had a conscious purpose, and I would buy all the records when they came out, the Dave Clark Five, you know, the Kinks, and then it got to psychedelia, and all that time, pretty quickly, me and my brothers and our friends. There'd always be a bunch of people at the house playing guitar, and so we learned fast because me, Lair, Ben, Tom Grimes, God, I can't remember his name now. There's that name block. Welsh fellow, really, really great guy. Anyways, a lot of guitar players at the house, and so
Yeah.
everybody could show somebody else something. So we progressed pretty quick. And I immediately, within like a year, I started mimicking. You know, like I'd write a song that was a knockoff of the Seeds. It was all like that. It was all just I wanted to do this. And just before, I started playing in bands, like in the summer of love. Larry and Ben had a lot of friends over that were playing guitar, but they weren't a band. And I said, well, let's have a band. And so
Yeah.
what do we need? We had a drummer and a bunch of guitarists, so I played bass. So I said, okay, I'll play the bass player, kind of like Paul McCartney did. You know, then we need something else. And so I put the band together because I have good organizational skills, and we were doing like Yardbirds, Hendrix, Kinks, Stones. We even worked on some Mothers of Invention songs. So it's in 13th floor elevator. So it's pretty progressive stuff for the time. And after that, I never stopped being in bands. And I always kind of had visions of what I wanted to do, but it was, you know, it was like kind of half formed until like just before my band, just before Sprout and Lair, it was like I was doing Hendrix and Cream knockoffs. And they were, you know, pretty good for a 16-year-old, you know, but it wasn't really up to par yet. But after that session with Lair and Ben, I realized, because I had already had ideas that didn't work in this other band. I just didn't know why. And now I said, God, here's Lair and Ben. And we'd played in that band together, the Summer of Love, where we did Yardbirds and Kinks. And so now it's like, oh, here's the band right here. We have this intuition because we're three brothers. We all listen to the same music. And like literally within a month, I'd written 12 songs for what became Sprout and Lair.
Well, that's perfect lead into screenwriting teacher told me great film or great art, great music is when you can clearly see the intention of the maker. Kubrick says the opposite. Great art is when you can clearly not see the intention of the maker. What role does intention play in your creative process when you're writing a song?
I mean, sometimes so it's a little hard to answer that, but lots of times I'll go, I have this idea, like I want to write something like this, and then I start down and writing it, and then it starts, it takes its own. It's what I call, like, I get a kernel, and once you have a kernel, it's going to start growing no matter what you do. It's just a matter of you follow the branch this way, maybe that branch doesn't lead anywhere, but once you have that kernel, you know that you're going to get a result at some point. On the other hand, that's one way of working. On the other hand, last fall I was doing the silent film band, the Anvil Orchestra, and we scored this film really fast, and then premiered it at the International Documentary Film Festival of Amsterdam, and it was a total success. And I came back home, it was like all this intense work, and I just like kind of like, oh, and all of a sudden I had a pop song. I'd just written this within a night. I'd written all the words, all the song. I go, where the hell did that come from? Like, I don't write pop songs really, but every so often I do. And it was just a pop song, and I kind of loved it for a day or two, and then I thought, this is really stupid. And then I put it away, and then I came back later, and now Trinary System is recording it next week in this session. But that was one that just kind of showed up, and I had no idea why it was even there. Like, as I was writing, I go, what the fuck am I doing? But I was doing it, it came out. Whereas other times I go, yeah, I want this and this and this. And honestly, there's another Trinary System song we're recording, Monkeys on Your Back, something like that. I don't know the title yet, but in the middle, it kind of breaks down, and I start talking directly to the audience about songwriting. I'm like, because before that, it's all about another topic. And the reason you create lyrics last is it's the gut emotion that counts. And people mishear the words, but still can be happy with the song. One projects in Rorschach's dream, one projects in an inkblot dream onto the words. You can be a country, you can be a corporation, you can be a blooming edge of a new revolution. So that's all a different, it's a completely different topic than the rest of the song. But you got to get the feeling first, and then you can put the words, and then people do mishear the words. As you know, I mean, there's some famous song where people heard the words wrong. And I've written songs that Mission of Burma's very first show, we did a song of mine called Smoldering Fuselage, which is intentionally surrealistic. Like, I was really making surrealist. It was about a plane crashing into a house and the thing's on fire and ghosts are escaping and stuff. And the opening line is, just outside the house that's dead, which is not your typical rock and roll lyric. And afterwards, I was in the audience, and a woman who played in a band called Human Sexual Response said, I really like that song, Smoldering Fuselage. She said, the lyrics were incredible. And I said, oh, what were they? And they were completely different from any words I had written. And I wish I had written them down because they were amazing, but they had no bearing. It was almost like a Finnegan's Wake kind of situation. It had no bearing whatsoever on what I had written. And I was really impressed with that. The fact that that could even occur,
That's the beauty of art. Now, Duchamp said there's no art without an audience. How much do you think of your audience when you're writing your song?
Usually not at all.
Yeah.
And even when, like in Mission of Burma shows, there's a song called Einstein's Day, which is it's a ballad, which is rare for Mission of Burma. And I do a long solo in it, very linear, like it's kind of an E major, C sharp minor. And I find that usually I just close my eyes and concentrate on the solo. And when I'm done with the solo, particularly if I've done a good job, I feel myself smiling, and I open my eyes and go, oh, right, there's an audience. Because I tend to go back and then out. I don't go out first. I don't really try to reach the audience first. I try to be correct inside, and that reaches the audience. Though I'm not above saying witty things and doing exaggerated gestures if that will get the song across. But generally my whole approach is go as far inside as I can and try to bring that out. And if it connects, great. And if it doesn't, well, I did my best.
Yeah.
Usually.
Great, Roger. McLuhan says that everything we invent extends some humanness or a human sensorium, like knife and fork extends our teeth, clothing's extension of our skin, like even non-tangible, like religion or philosophy might be an extension of consciousness. What does the keyboard extend for you? What humanness?
I mean, playing keyboards like this.
Yeah, the instrument, whether it's an electric keyboard or acoustic
Or
piano.
it could be a guitar too, right? I mean, mostly I'm a guitarist.
If you're mostly a guitarist, we can put it in the guitar terms. What does the guitar extend? What humanness does it extend?
Well, yeah, I mean, definitely. I mean, there's a little pun there. It amplifies certain emotions if it's right through a Marshall amplifier. It if you really work on, like blues, let's say, and I'm not a blues player, though I like blues and I like playing blues, but and sometimes when I'm playing solos or riffs, they're like blues in that they try to pull out like a you're not, I'm not going to go on stage and just cry at the audience. That's not a good gig. But if you can make your guitar make people feel like they're crying and releasing something, that's guitar is good for. To me, piano is a little more intellectual, perhaps. But that's because you can see it all. Like a guitar to me is much more physical instrument. You can walk around. It's an extension of your body, whereas a piano, it's more like an extension of your mind.
Of your mind. Yeah, that's good. Yeah. Yeah, this poet, but I thought you said the word emotion. I didn't quite read it, but this poet said, "What does the pencil or keyboard extend for you as a poet? What humanness?" And he goes, "Tears."
Yeah, that's what I said about the guitars.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
So, Copeland says the four elements or ingredients of music are melody, harmony, rhythm, and tone color. In layperson's terms, how would you describe what is tone color?
Also, I disagree with his statement, but I can explain that shortly. But I guess I mean, I don't have synesthesia, where you see colors,
Yeah.
but I label literally. I do label my songs. These are kind of metallic blue. These are red. These are yellow.
Right.
So it's like a halfway to synesthesia, perhaps.
Yeah.
But I mean, like a tone color, something that doesn't have a lot of high frequencies, which I might call slightly browner in the tone, rounder and more gentle, and then the one with more sharper, higher frequencies, more metallic, let's say. Um, it affects the ear and the mind differently, or the emotion. I mean, you got to go through the mind to get to the emotions somehow.
But you can elaborate on how you disagree or
Yeah,
elaborate more on Copeland's, but how do you navigate those four? Are you more a melody, harmony, rhythm, or tone color person?
I'll describe now my composition Vines for Music that premiered at the New England Conservatory and was written up in some arts magazine very favorably, and it got a rousing response. In it, there is no melody, no harmony, no rhythm, and no concert pitch. So I got rid of all those things that Copeland was talking about. I based it on a photograph I took of vines on my wall. The leaves were off, and then I gridded it out, and I prepared. The entire piano is prepared, the John Cage technique, where you put objects in the strings, and the strings are, sometimes make two tones. They don't, anyways. Yeah. And I had three piano players, and they were playing the kind of the suction cups of the vines over the course. I gridded it out in 7 minutes and 7 octaves. And when the one vine started there, and over 7 minutes, boy, it's hard doing it backwards. It gets to here. There's a glissando that goes from here, damn it, to there in 7 minutes. And so there's no concert pitch. It may have started on D, but almost immediately it's off of D. So there's no concert pitch. There's no harmony. There's just interactions of sounds. So it's a much more of a Cagean type of thing. And literally, when this piece, while it was being played, I was going, God, I can't believe people are playing this. This is, it just, I loved it. And it was something I totally believe in. And when it was done, the audience, people were whooping, like, woo! And when I left the place, two groups of 20-something-year-olds, it was a music festival at the New England Conservatory, came up to me. It was like a Mission of Burma concert. They're like, that was fantastic. Like they were afraid to talk to me because I was, so special. And I was like, this just happened with this piece I wrote for a string quartet and prepared piano that has no melody, no rhythm, no harmony, no concert pitch. And I was like, I must be doing something right.
Yeah.
That's what I felt like. So
that's beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, New England Conservatory too. We were bringing up George Russell.
Yes, I know George. I'm gradually beaming in on him.
Yeah, he was teaching there for 20, 30 years.
Yeah,
but in fact, this guy from Michigan was, what I was going to say is Greg Ramsey was in this punk rock band in Michigan, and he ended up working for George for like 25 years. And he told me this great story I'm sure you'll love. George would sit down on the piano and Miles is with him, and he'd hit a chord on the piano and go, check out this chord. And he'd go, gong. And then Miles go, that's nothing. Check out this chord. Ging. And they would just make up chords.
Totally.
But this leads to the next question, since you brought up cages. What is the function of music?
I mean, it serves a bunch of different functions, but mostly it's like all those things like theater and dance, and storytelling. It gives people a way, a path for them to release themselves, something like that. And I remember thinking when Mission of Burma was starting in punk rock, well, it was post-punk by the time Burma started, but you could tell people were really into it. It really meant something to them. And religion has just gradually, more or less, gets less and less valuable over time. And we become, I didn't think of myself as a priest, but in some respect, we are the one that are translating the world for the people, much in the same way that, a priest would declamate about, a passage in the Bible and people would sit there and listen. We were doing the same thing, except for it was much more, much more chthonic and immediate. And the very fact that it was more chthonic made it more real to me, because sometimes when you get to the religion stuff and all you want to do is deal with heaven, well, what about all the dirt down here? You have to integrate that dirt.
Really well put, because Cage said the function of music, what he learned from his teacher, was to soothe the soul and make it susceptible for divine intervention. So, it's sort of what you just described without knowing it. So that was cool. But I just read in the Bill Frisell book, Ben Ratcliffe is the music critic, and I'm curious your thoughts on this. He says, I mean sound, as it is long functioned among jazz players as a mystical term of art, as in every musician finally needs a sound, a full and sensible embodiment of their artistic personality, such that it can be heard at best in a single note. So then he gives the description, Miles, we can hear Miles, and in one note we can, and it's in relationship to his whole work. The two adjectives were fragile and pointed. Coleman Hawkins was ripe, mellow, generous. Coltrane was slightly undercooked and urgent. So
it's good stuff.
Yeah. So if if we were saying the Roger Clark Miller sound was being written up by some music writer that you respect, what two adjectives would you say nails describing your sound?
I would have to leave that to the critic.
Okay, no worries.
It would just be babbling, I think, for me to describe.
That's cool. So another friend of mine says that three tenets of music are taste, theory, and technique. So theory, you can learn what chords you're playing. Technique is how to play them. How does one acquire taste? Like, how did you acquire taste to go Jimi Hendrix and then go punk rock and then go wherever? How does one acquire taste?
Right. I mean, you follow your own internal thread. But like when the Beatles kicked in, I liked everything in the British Invasion. Like I liked the Dave Clark Five. And people in my sixth grade class, well, they're not the Beatles. You can't like them. Literally, it was like kind of radical to like the Dave Clark Five, which is a little hard to believe at this state. But the Searchers, the Kinks, I liked them all, some more than others. And I remember Trinary System has a song called Dave Davies. Like when I heard Dave Davies, he kind of helped me go crazy. When I was just a little kid, but I was feeling what he did. And like when that song "You Really Got Me" came on, it was just a little more intense than anybody else. And just before the guitar solo, Ray just goes kind of moans, and Dave goes like barking like a dog. And then this like 7.5 seconds of just blistering high-speed Chuck Berry riffs, and then it was gone. And I really remember that was okay. That's, I mean, the Beatles are a guitar band, but that's guitar playing. So that was like the first kind of pivot. And then as got closer to psychedelia, I mean, I remember when My Generation kicked in, like, wow, I really like that. And the guy could play French horn too, the bass player. I was a bass player at the time. Really like that. And then I was all the new bands I was kind of following, and then Gary Puckett and the Union Gap, woman, whoa. And I go, why don't I like these guys? And that's when you start to pull the shaft from the wheat or whatever. And even Meet the Beatles, which I bought the day after I saw them on TV, I go, what is the song "And I Love Her" doing on this album? It was like from the previous generation. Like I liked every song except for "And I Love Her," and I still have a problem with some of Paul's aesthetics. And I just like right away it just was different. Like I close your eyes, I could still, it's still a blatant love song, but it had this energy and was real guitar-y, and this other one was kind of like the previous generation. So you just kind of, and then you follow it. And then when psychedelia kicked in, like the 13th Floor Elevators with their quasi-religious blend with acid and the candles on the wall and stuff. It was right, like I was in ninth grade, the summer of love, so ninth going into 10th. And I was starting to, blossom into like more conscious of what I was doing and needing something to fill that void, as we were talking about. And that was there. It was like this mixture of dream state and spiritual convolution all kind of blended. And then you put that with My Generation and, Foxy Lady, and you have a full life.
Wow. Well put. I got to interject really fast. Did you see the Kinks at Cobo when Beefheart opened for them?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was there. Yeah. The Beefheart, that was Doc at the radar station, like fairly straight for Beefheart, but I just remember my left foot never stopped stomping to those swampy rhythms. Even though it's later than I wanted, I saw them on the Lick My Decals Off Baby tour. And that was a unique experience. But this was still really, really good. And when I saw the Kinks, I remember Lair left because it was such a letdown. Like my brother Lair, I was there with him.
Yeah.
But I stayed through to the end, and mostly, it was like show tunes. They were almost like show tunes. And the song "Little Miss Queen of Darkness," which is on Face to Face, which is just a brilliant rock album. And the record, it has this mystery to it. And they did it like it was a show tune, like, "Hey, everybody, Little Miss Queen of Darkness." And I was like, you just fucking ruined the song. But I still stayed to the end because it was, the Kinks,
Yeah. And this idea of taste and how humans acquire it. I'm curious your reaction to this McLuhan statement. Song is slowed down speech. The reason cultures have different musical taste is ultimately connected to language difference. Any comment?
I don't know. I don't know enough to comment on it.
Yeah.
I'm sure it has to do with, I mean, if you listen to Japanese or Chinese classical music, it's pretty slow, most of it. Like the rhythms are like difficult to grasp for a Westerner, and but they can talk really fast, So I don't have an answer for that. I don't know enough about it.
What's more fundamental, language or music?
Well, I mean, everybody everywhere has language, but if you had three people together that didn't speak the same language, they could follow a melody, they could follow a rhythm. It's likely.
Yeah.
I would say that's a more direct beeline to the skull, or into the soul, or whatever you want to call it, because language you have to figure out what everything means, and that means intellectually, whereas music can just go directly, bypass all that shit, and go right into the soul.
Beautiful. Roger, can you tell me an instrumental song that makes you laugh?
Uh, there are a few. I mean, the Munsters. I like the Munsters theme.
There you go. That's a good. So Thelonious Monk said there are no wrong notes. Any comment?
Oh, there are no wrong notes. There are no good chords. There are no bad chords. Everything is context. I think even Monk will say that would have said that within a context there might be, like, if you're supposed to go and you went like you might go, really? You might still like it though. Monk had yeah. I mean, I love Monk.
Yeah. My friend has a great observation, Duggo. He said, Monk heard all the notes Charlie Parker heard, but only decided to play some of them.
Oh, yeah. I love his piano playing because I really don't like the jazz style where they're always comping with the big chords and you're just playing too much. And like Monk will go, bang, he'll hit the 7 of the chord that everybody else would play like 17 pitches, and he just hits one thing, and you've got to figure out what it means.
It's amazing.
It's great.
And it leads right into Miles saying this talks about the space between notes. How do you navigate the space between notes?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good one. It goes also to Cage's thing about silence.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's where, get those guitar players, especially, that want to play really, really fast all the time. It's like, I would rather hear, like, there's a solo, the band the Buzzcocks.
Yeah.
Dun, dun, oh God, I can't remember what song it is. It might be, it's Boredom off the Spiral Scratch EP, and the guitar solo, which Peter Shelley plays, who's the lead guitar, down, ding, down, ding. It's just 2 notes for about a minute, and then he goes, dan. He hits one different note, and it's one of the greatest guitar solos I've ever heard. And I can also analyze Foxy Lady, which is an astounding solo too, for very different reasons. But then half the guitar players, like, I'm not a big fan of Jimmy Page for that very reason.
Yeah.
Just like, why put some more space in there,
Yep. Yeah. Now with shredding becoming, well, once shredding came in, like with Yngwie, it was like, dude, we heard this with John McLaughlin, Intermounting Flame, years ago, and there was a lot more tape.
Yeah.
But hey, he's just wanting to recreate Paganini. So I'm curious, George Manupelli started the Ann Arbor Film Festival 60 years ago. His mantra was ignore yourself. Jonas Mekas said there is no self-expression. And Cecil Taylor says, I'm just a vehicle and this stuff just comes through me. Is art making, music making, and it's a stupid question, I know it's both, but just your thoughts. Is art making, music making more self-expression, or more you're a vehicle for whatever culture, technology, or environments are dominant?
Yeah, it's a mix. I mean, the interesting thing is, John Cage was the ultimate guy who wanted to not express himself, but you can almost always identify a John Cage piece. like immediately. So no matter, he worked the hardest of anybody to not have an ego, and still, it's him. So you can't avoid that. But you want to get beyond yourself as much as you can. So in that sense, you're trying to transcend yourself. You always want to do something that's more real, or more like discover something. At least that's how a lot of people are. I'll bring it back to dreams just for a second here, because it's relevant. And it's partly why I use dreams to organize music, is like each person's dream is just astoundingly egocentric. Like only you could have dreamed the dream that you dreamt. Only you, because it's just utterly egocentric, and yet you had no control. In general, you have zero control over it. So it's a mixture of mega ego and no ego simultaneously. That's what I kind of find fascinating with dreams, and why I like using them to structure music, because it's simultaneously universal. Like everybody has dreams, and there are if you look at 1,000 dreams, you'll see patterns, and yet it's universal, and yet it's super self-centered, but it can be self-centered to me, and it can mean something completely different to someone else. Yeah. I find that to be a very fascinating kind of resolution to that problem.
Well, we're going to get back into dreams. That was really a great observation. But my follow-up question to the vehicles question is usually, can art making be egoless? And I'm just going to tell you how people usually answer it, because you've already addressed it, but it's curious. When I say, can art making be egoless, 80 to 90% say no. But I was astounded when one person said, great art is egoless. So any comment on that? Can art making, music making be egoless?
I don't think so, really.
Yeah.
We're trapped in our bodies most of the time. I mean, I believe there are ways to transcend that. I don't want to, I'm not going to get into like details, but so if you're trapped in a body, your body wants to survive generally, which has to do with ego. On the other hand, there are people that I would be willing to give up my body, for my son when he was a kid. When he was like 3 years old, I probably would have given up my body to have him live. I mean, that's probably what would have happened if that problem came up. But that's not even being egoless, because he's my offspring. Like, how can you really get rid of yours? I mean, maybe I'm using the word ego slightly incorrectly, but you can't get rid of that kind of thing. And I was thinking about it yesterday. Is the fact that I care about my son more than I care about random children walking around, that's incredibly self-centered. Like, should I be critical of myself for that? And then I go, no, because animals have to take care of their young. It's their responsibility. Yeah. But it's a kind of a problem in a way, if you like being involved with those problems. And I don't really like it. It's just I do it.
No, I know exactly what you're saying. And I'm curious your thoughts on this. What was the motive of the cave artist?
Oh God, I mean, the earliest magic is like sympathetic magic. If you draw a bison's going to come. I mean, that's a cheap ass explanation, though, because I mean, they were probably amazed. I mean, it didn't just happen overnight or in 100 years. It took a long time to really develop cave art to the point where they could do it and make it look like deer and bison. Though I can't tell you, maybe it just did happen overnight because I wasn't there. But it was probably just amazing. It's like, look, and it's, I mean, you're projecting what's in here outside. That's a major thing that Homo sapiens can do that I don't think most animals can. And so it was, yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, McLuhan has this great line. The Balinese have no word for art. They do everything as well as they can.
Yeah.
It's like kids, when little kids draw, they don't go, oh, I'm going to, do this so my mom will put this on the refrigerator as a piece of art. They just do it,
Right. I mean, then later on you find out, oh, if I do this, mom will put it on, and then you start doing it for that reason. And then is it art anymore? That's the question.
So what's more important, Roger, conviction or compromise?
Conviction. But everything is a compromise, like literally everything. I mean, I had to do it at 2:00 with you today. I could have been out like cleaning the pond. So, and to get along with anybody, the minute you have two people, it's a compromise.
Yeah.
But, I mean, that's putting it, making it sound worse than it really is. But compromise is, there's a give and take. But you have to have conviction. Really, as an artist, I've put myself in situations where I just refuse to cooperate. And if I had cooperated, I could have possibly, gotten more money doing this or could have boosted my career. But it's just like I did not believe in what was being done.
Yeah.
And
well, in your accomplishments, this is a perfect follow-up to what you just said. In your accomplishments, how do you rate these three elements? Luck, skill, and ambition. What played the biggest role, second and third?
Natural inclination was the first thing, and then that generated interest, and then I saw what I would like to do, and then I acquired the skill. What were the three things again?
Luck, skill, and ambition.
So once I got the skill, so I could do it, I am not ambitionless. Like I always, like by the time I was in 7th grade, I wanted to make records, but I didn't know how to have a band, and then by the time I was in high school, I've written enough material for an album. It didn't happen, but it did happen. That same record that I was telling you about before that got me depressed because no one was interested in the band, that's been released twice since to high acclaim. So ambition is part of it, but ambition is not the primary, like luck, skill, ambition. There's also intention, I think.
Yeah.
Like when when Burma folded the second time, it was like 2015, and Deb and I took a vacation down to Four Corners, like for 2 weeks. We went from Salt Lake City to Boulder and went down to Four Corners, a place that I was at a lot as a child. And I remember we were staying near Santa Fe, and I was going, well, what am I going to do now that I don't have Mission Burma because I need to make stuff. I don't think of myself, doesn't necessarily make me important. It's what I need to do. Like some people need to smoke cigarettes, though that's a little worse. And I started thinking about my interest in records, and that's with my pop record Evolving, which I made a record of Record Noise in '83. But I just made these things. Like it was a record of Record Noise based on John Cage and Duchamp, and I made one copy, and I played it at some of my concerts, and then it got someone like who Christian Marclay is.
Yes.
Yeah, he was around. He was part of the Boston punk rock scene. Actually, I saw him play in a band, and my record, Pop Record Evolving, was reviewed in the Arts New England alongside his Record Without a Cover because they both came out at the same time. But I wasn't ambitious. I just thought, yeah, I'm a guy who has bands, and it was just an idea. Like the ideas are what I live for.
Yeah.
If I had been a little more savvy, I could have said, wow. But see, Christian Marclay wasn't anybody in particular then either, So, but I could have thought if I had had a mentor that said, you could pursue this conceptual art, which I now have done, and so to bring it back to in Santa Fe in 2015, I thought, well, what can I do? And I've got this pop record Evolving that since then has been in shows along with Christian Marclay. How can I incorporate that? And then my music with string quartet and the record. So I started conceptualizing, bringing my natural intentions and trying to put them in a format that other people that might garner attention. That equals some form of, that equation equals ambition of some sort. Like if I want to make something of this, if I can put my idea into a form that people can cop onto, then it could put me in a position where maybe I could keep doing it and I could, survive as an artist. And that's a form of ambition. But I mean, I had ambition in high school. I thought Sprout and Layer, like, I'm 17, I'm 18. Well, 18 was recorded, and I've already done what my heroes have done. And I thought, I'm headed, completely naive, knowing nothing about the music business. And when it crashed, literally, it was almost like I was depressed for 10 years until Mission to Burma started again in 1979. I wasn't really depressed for 10 years, but it was like, instead, I learned a lot in between. But that brings the luck thing. Like, I consider that I am someone who stumbles around and just keeps stumbling until I stumble into the right place. And I go, well, look, here I am. Look over there. That could be useful. And that's how I consider that my career has been, pretty much stumbling.
Yeah, that's good. That's the flaneur psychogeography. That's the point I brought up earlier, was we don't have to necessarily name a destination or go to a destination. We can just wander and stumble around. That's what the people in the 20s in Paris did. That's where psychogeography sort of started, this idea of flaneurs.
I don't know the psychogeography or the flaneurs.
Yeah, but you were doing it without knowing it. That's fine.
Right.
It's so it leads to this. Moshe Feldenkrais works with healing and movement. He says it's literally possible to identify a weakness and incorporate it to become a strength, rather than we're normally taught to overcome a weakness. Tell me a weakness you turned into a strength.
I mean, I know that John Cage did that. Schoenberg told him he had no sense for melody and harmony. He said, well, screw that. I'm going to make percussion music out of chunks of metal, which led to so, I mean, he did that with a vengeance. I mean, my weakness is that or some of them is I'm just completely intolerant of doing things I don't want to do.
And then how is that being intolerant how's that turned into a strength for you?
Well, I just kept refusing to do what people normally do. But instead I guess what happened was that was a mixture of stumbling around, like between 1970 and 1979, when punk rock started, at the end of psychedelia. In retrospect, I learned all sorts of different disparate ideas that I could put together. By 1979 and 83, I had a pretty big palette of ideas, but I didn't realize at the time, I just thought I was stumbling around like, why am I doing this? Well, that's interesting.
Well, you brought up punk rock. It's funny because a good example of that, you articulated it well, Roger, is Iggy said, my band was so bad at imitating the Rolling Stones, we invented punk rock.
Yeah, just do what you do, and just, I mean, in that sense, punk rock is no different from psychedelia or any other,
right.
or early rap stuff,
yeah,
hip hop. It's just like, you just screw them all. I'm going to do what I want. And if you it's like Cecil Taylor, we can bring back up to him. He's like, most of the time, for a long time, he played mostly like this, and it's like, you are overwhelmed not by his sense of melody, because there's almost no melody in his music, or even rhythm, because it's not rhythmic other than patterns and stuff. It's you are forced to believe in him because of his conviction. His conviction that he is doing that is what convinces you. And I sometimes think, if my music comes across, it's just because I believe in it so strongly that you can't resist that belief.
Can't resist it.
Something like that.
And I loved how you put your hands to describe Cecil, because it reminded me of, have you ever watched on YouTube Slim Gaillard playing piano with his fingers up like this way? You've got to see it. It's like I've studied pianists for many years. I've never found any pianist who played with their fingers
played upside down,
just on one track for a few minutes.
Is he the guy that they had some kind of whacked out, not really novelty songs, but that kind of stuff?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Dunkin' Bagels,
Yeah. Great stuff, like really great stuff.
He's great. Yeah, the freakiest is Nancy and Ronald Reagan memorized every Slim Gaylord lyric. It's like, whoa.
That accounts like I got to get another glass of water, but I'll be right back.
Sure. Nope.
It'll be very brief. If I can get my leg around the table here. Oh, look, there it goes.
And we're talking with Roger Clark Miller. I suggest people pursue his music online, and there's quite a lot of it there, and it's duly worth listening to because it's so varied. It covers many genres. And boy, it was not really been a trip here. Well, we only got about 10 more minutes. Can you go a little longer, or do you want to end in 10?
Whatever you want to do.
Okay, well, we'll go a little more than 10. Just to wrap it up, a couple more. There's a line, Roger, that goes, "You create what you resist." Bob Goldthwait, the comedian, said, "You are what you hate."
Mm-hmm.
James Joyce said, "It's a curious thing how your mind is super saturated with the religion in which you say you disbelieve." And Bunwell nailed it. He said, "Thank God I'm an atheist." So this line, I'm not saying you, Roger, but how do you react, or what's your thoughts on this idea? You create what you resist, or one creates what one resists. Any thoughts on that idea?
A little bit. That's why, if possible, you try not to. I mean, there's a time for direct confrontation when there's no other alternative. But like I said earlier, if you make humor about it, I think John Lennon said something like that too. Like, you defeat the enemy by humor, not by hitting back at their face. Because the minute you start doing that, you become more like them. And that's. But there's a time where you feel like you've got to fight back, and there would be a time, if it had to happen. But
then fill in the blank. Anger can be a productive emotion when?
Mostly when it's self-directed. One of my phrases that I like is, "Disgust is a useful tool." I just get disgusted at myself, like, God, that's just so bad. And then that pushes me to do something that's improvement. If it's not, sometimes I become self-critical and it's really not, there's nothing productive about it. But sometimes disgust can be a useful tool. If you're so disgusted with something, that makes you do something that's not going to be like that.
Yeah.
But sometimes also you can just get trapped in it too. So.
Yeah, we call that flip a breakdown into a breakthrough, or flip a rejection into a redirection.
Mm-hmm.
So, is perception reality?
A fragment thereof.
Can you forget to die?
That's a loopy question. I don't worry about dying. I mean, death has never bothered me. My own, anyways.
Yeah. How do you find peace of mind?
Well, yeah. I mean, I live in Vermont. Like, I live on a mountainside, and you can't see any houses. And we have a dirt road, and when a car goes by, you go, "What was that? You know who that is? Oh yeah, that's the blue Camaro on the top of the mountainside." But of course, I lived in Chinatown in Boston, and I live in Boston for 40 years, which is, a fairly bustling, loud city. I find, probably through art to some degree, like if I'm thinking about Kandinsky or Bela Bartok or, the Ramones, I remember when Trump won the election, I was in Rochester, New York with the Alloy Orchestra, and I was having coffee anyways the next day, and I was really pretty depressed. I was like, what the fuck just happened? And then the radio in the place played "Any Way You Want It" by the Dave Clark Five, and it's just a throwaway pop tune, but it came on and it released, like, it allowed me to feel sane or I was back into myself, centered into myself. I have a body, there is some truth in the world. Now, when you start thinking the Dave Clark 5 is the truth, you're already teetering on the edge. But, at that moment, that really, really helped me and made me laugh and made me temporarily feel relief.
It's really good. And since you brought it up, I really wanted to, I mean, we could do a whole salon someday podcast on music to films. And you particularly have performed music live with orchestras, or how many pieces?
The Anvil Orchestra is just 3 people.
3 people.
I play a keyboard that's orchestral, and they play percussion, accordion.
And what drew you to that? Because do you do exclusively silent films that are usually old?
Yeah. This group, the Anvil Orchestra, it's just changed recently to the Anvil Orchestra. There's just 2 of us. Yeah, we scored Ziga Vertov's second film. But I'm gonna have to answer this in kind of a long story. My first girlfriend was a dancer, and so she said, "Well, why don't you accompany the dance classes?" And I accompanied on piano because that worked the best. And I found that once I got my head around it, I was a really good accompanist. I was offered a full-time job at the University of Michigan. I could have been the head of the dance accompaniment department and had a cushy job for the rest of my life. But I said, no, I don't know what I needed to do, but I needed to be in Mission of Burma afterwards. So that's what happened. But I have a natural accompaniment mentality. And so besides the silent film group, I've also scored 4 films that were at Sundance. I seem to have a natural ability to adapt my music to film and dance and other people's ideas. Though if you leave me alone, I'll generate stuff of my own that sometimes most people would barely call music. On occasion, like Lines for Music, where it has no melody, no harmony, and still people liked it. Like, I did my best to get rid of everything, and they still liked it.
But it's a little different than, I interviewed a guy recently who wrote a book on Max Steiner, and people don't realize how important he was in movie soundtrack producing. And then the pinnacle, sort of like Bernard Herrmann, this guy,
yeah, he's amazing.
He's making music that's way better than just being called soundtracks. But then there's Nina Rota, there's a lot of them. But this whole idea of diegetic music, where the music is heard by the fictional character, and then there's non-diegetic music, which is background music that enhances. In fact, Mike Mosier taught me that great line, which I cleared up with this Steiner scholar. Betty Davis said, "I don't want Max Steiner following me up the steps on this scene," meaning like she wanted to show off her acting chops, and she didn't want music to enhance her. But indeed, the Steiner guy told me, no, that's said, but it's out of context, because Steiner was Betty's main source. That's my man. That's who I want. But I mean, maybe talk a little different about playing live is there a difference playing live to a screening of a silent film and then scoring it so that it's on the soundtrack, and then you don't have to play it live and watch the film and play it?
Well, there's not much different there. I mean, it's more fun to play it live, and the audience can feel that, anytime there's a live performance, there's threat, like the band might screw up, and so that gives it, the fact that it's being performed live gives it a more more electrical energy. The bigger difference, like silent films, there's just film and music. Now, if you saw a movie today, there's film, voiceover, sound design, wind, footsteps, and then music. So music has been relegated way back here, whereas when we accompany like a Buster Keaton or Ziga Vertov film, there's no talking, there's no sound design, there's no winds, there's no footsteps, there's nothing. So we are more active participants as the band. Like sometimes we'll, when a cannon fires. There's a pause in the can of fires with a big cymbal crash or a gong on that. So it's kind of sound design. Lots of times, you know, if a horse is going, there might be like little wood blocks, or a train is going, there's a on the drums. So we have to tell much more information in the story. So we're much more in your face than music for regular films, which as I said, I've scored 4 of them that were in Sundance. And there, the music is sometimes it's pretty upfront, but most of the time it's behind the talking, and you know, you hear the helicopter going, and you hear music underneath, and you hear gunfire, blah blah blah. So it's so to do the silent film live is more like being in a band.
Yeah,
and you know, you got to rock. You know, you've got to rock it. Except that you can't speed up or slow down, because Buster Keaton isn't going to adapt to you. You have to adapt to Buster Keaton because he's gone. You know, he's up there in celluloid. But when I do the, you know, the regular scoring for modern films, you take your time. You bring in the cellos later, and you hire a French horn player, and then you you know, produce it, and you put it up. You know, it's a different. It's not like being in a band. That's more like a composer sitting. It's more self-centered.
Yeah, Roger, you use the word threat, and I'm curious, this is risky. What does courage mean to you now?
You know, I guess to do what you believe.
Yeah.
A lot of people, I don't know what they believe. There's a whole continuum. There some beliefs that, you know, we're hearing now is like, are these really beliefs? And what can they be beliefs when you're claiming to be a Christian and that you want more guns?
Yeah.
What the hell?
It is amazing time. Weird. If you were walking down the street today and you met yourself as a 12-year-old, what would you say to your 12-year-old self?
I would probably say you're doing better than you think you are.
Nice.
Because I was fairly negative about myself as growing up, but I realized later, like, wow, you know, like by the time I got in my mid-20s, I actually like people, and I thought I was just a loner and didn't like people. I was kind of disappointed to realize that I like people, and now I really like people. I like even people that have seriously different political beliefs than me. I can almost always find a way to like them, and that's in a way that's irritating, but I can't help it. And you know, I shouldn't be such a harsh judge of myself, and I still shouldn't. That's what Deb keeps saying to me. It's like, look what you've done. Don't be so harsh on yourself. And I go,
Yeah.
right, okay. Sorry.
Yeah. Yeah, American Indians, indigenous say your enemy is your best teacher. So it's like, why not engage with them? You can learn from them. You don't have to argue and try to change their mind. You could actually learn. But so these are 5 quick Alan Watts questions, just off the top of your head in just a couple words. Who started it all?
Prometheus, the guy who invented fire.
Oh, I like that. Are we going to make it?
A small fraction might.
Where do we put it?
I hope there's space.
Nice. Who's cleaning it up?
Next generations.
Is it serious?
Depends. It depends how you look at it. I think of it as being fairly serious, but
yeah,
that's because I'm a human and I'm goal oriented.
Yeah. Frank Zappa said, I'm very serious about being not serious.
He's a pretty serious guy. Like,
yeah. Should toilet paper come off the roll over or under?
I prefer the over, but I leave that to everybody's. I don't have a dogma for others.
If a publisher was to release your autobiography off the top of your head, what would the title be?
I am a slave to my ideas.
They want to They want to scent the glue in the binding. What smell?
Either pine trees or kind of the sage that lives in the desert, that kind of a sagebrush. Probably sagebrush.
I like that. If a statue was built in your honor, where would you want it displayed and what would it be made of?
Wow. I'd probably put it in the woods somewhere that somebody might stumble upon. I don't know. I don't know what it would be made of. Inexpensive, biodegradable material.
Nice. Roger, tell me something good you never had, but you never wanted.
Something good that I never had, but no.
It's good, you never had it, but you never want it.
Oh, I don't know. A Jaguar.
You know,
car.
how I've had like 3 interviews in a row say, an expensive car. You know what the answer I get the most in 40 years? Fame, money, and heroin.
Wow.
It's weird. Okay, if you were in a vat of vomit up to your neck and someone threw a bag of shit at your face, what would you do?
I'd probably dive under.
Dive under. Okay. Couple more and we're out of here. What's the cultural shift you see developing today that inspires you?
Hmm. Oh man. Well, mostly the hopeless ones, or the unlikely to succeed ones. I mean, I like Ocasio-Cortez, and I like if the green, responsibility to the earth thing is a good deal, but it's probably too late.
That's good. I want AOC and Angela Davis to run, on a ticket together. Come on.
That's not going to happen. But.
If they can run Reagan, we should have run Oprah years ago or somebody,
Yes, sure. Like, what the hell?
Thornton Wilder said in 1928, art is confession. Art is the secret told. But art is not only the desire to tell one's secret, it's the desire to tell it and hide it at the same time. You've laid your cards on the table for over an hour and a half. I'm not insinuating you haven't already answered this, but what's it really all about for you?
For some reason, I have lots of ideas of things to do. I can't really praise the fact that I do, but it becomes interesting. Usually, it's interesting, and I just want to do it for that. It's like that's what I'm good at, is having those ideas. I mean, it's like I just want to do a good job. I mean, that's really what and that's to me, that's my job, is to kind of invent as new of an idea as I can without just forcing like something wacky as possible. I hope no one's ever done this before. It's like, but organically to discover something. And then after that, I would like it to be able to be perceived by the world and maybe help other people. I'm a person with lots and lots of ideas, and maybe it would be useful to others, because like John Cage's ideas and Duchamp's ideas and Sun Ra's and Monk's ideas are all useful to me.
Yeah. Umberto Eco said it well. He said, we're standing on the shoulders of giants, but we can actually literally maybe look farther than them. And, it's like the problem in that regard, it's not a problem, but it's a challenge, is how do you absorb your influences and then abandon them?
Right. That's a very interesting question. And it was funny when Mission of Burma we were first starting to get notoriety and people were talking about us a lot. like some bands, you could see their two influences. Like Mission of Burma had so many influences that you couldn't pinpoint any one that made us what we were. And I was like, yeah, I like that.
Yeah, that's good. Roger, this has been truly enlightening. I appreciate it. The last question is, what gives you the most optimism?
uh, when people are good to each other.
Yeah.
I guess. I mean, I live in a really beautiful neighborhood. Deb had the house before she met me, and I'm living here now. And for some reason, our neighborhood is just incredible. We all help each other out when we need help, and just like that kind of community I've never really had like that. And it's just like, wow, how did it show up on this mountainside of Vermont that I'm friendly with literally all my neighbors? And there's only 15 of them in 2 square miles, but it's kind of interesting.
It's beautiful because the first question I asked is, what's the best thing for a human being? And you talked about finding yourself through your friends and your environment. I got that question from a friend who studied Wilhelm Reich. The best thing for a human being is another human being. And then the last question is, what gives you the most optimism? That's the question they asked Groucho Marx at the end of his life. And he said, what gives me the most optimism is other people. And, he spent his life cutting down other people.
Right.
But it is been a pleasure spending this time with you, Roger. I really appreciate it. And I'm going to hit the end broadcast button, but I hope the discussion never ends and we can keep on talking forever and ever.
All right. It was my pleasure too. So thanks very much.